All right, we're going to get right into it. We have so much to cover. Chris is back mostly from your journey in Brazil. I know that people have been asking so many questions, a lot of questions about the ayahuasca, though there's so much more to discuss beyond those experiences. And I want to start with just some information. So I don't know about everybody else, but when I was in elementary school and we were learning about the European explorers coming to the Americas, we were taught, I don't know if we were told this specifically or it was sort of implied, though we were taught that North America, Central America, and South America were virtually uninhabited, that they were just these pristine lands. Maybe there were 100 people here and there, scattered tribes, but basically that the land was just here up for grabs, and it was just a miracle that these European explorers found it. And that I found that education to be intriguing, and I don't think I really began digging deeper until the phrase winners write their own history began repeating. And then I looked into it. I was watching a documentary, and I'll just share some stats from the documentary to just highlight how many people were actually living throughout these continents before the arrival of the European explorers in 1492. So, North America, including Mexico. So, the United States and Canada, most scholars settle around there being or having been somewhere between 7 and 10 million people, 15 to 25 million in Mexico. In Central America, there were 5 to 10 million people. In South America, there were 20 to 30 million. So really anywhere from 50 to 60 million. The higher estimates range from 90 to 100 million. So millions of people were living in North, Central, and South America before the conquistadors and colonizers arrived. Within about 100 years, 90% of that population was decimated. It wasn't until the Standing Rock protests in 2016 that I really began feeling called to lean into this area of study and called to the value in indigenous wisdom, because I saw a sign. In 2016, I was still in my old corporate job, and I had a standing desk. I remember standing at my standing desk looking up any footage I could come across that showed what was happening at the Standing Rock protests. And I remember seeing a sign that said, "We're still here." And that sign just hit me like an arrow through the heart and began a sort of an existential journey of what have we been learning and how much can we learn from the indigenous population that's still here. Well, perhaps 90% of the original population was wiped out along with the arrival of the European explorers. 10% was still here, still passing on wisdom, still keepers of sacred medicines and sacred traditions. And then a year later, I attended the California Roots Arts and Music Festival, where it was the first time I heard Nako, A Medicine for the People. And Nako began a song, well, he began the performance with having us ground in, drop in together, and set some new moon intentions. And before one of his songs, he had us all chant together, Ku Kiao Mauna. And we all said it back to him. He said, Ku Kiao Mauna. It was like a call and response, and we said it back. And he explained a little bit about what's going on today at Mauna Kea. So I just wanted to share a little bit about this because this is also just weaves along with the bigger picture I'm hoping to portray as to the value in your journey and spending time with an indigenous tribe born from the earth. So the protest at Mauna Kea, I can't believe this is not like the thing on the news. This is part of our country, part of the United States. If you want to believe Hawaii is part of the United States, it's kind of hard for me to conceptualize that an island still so rich with native tradition would ever have to conform to the United States government, yet that's what's happening in these protests. What's happening is the United States government has okayed the building of, it's known as TMT, or the 30-meter telescope. And our country wants to build this telescope on Mauna Kea, which is, I'll just share this. It's revered as the umbilical connection between Earth Mother and Sky Father, and considered the origin of the Hawaiian people. How does it get more sacred than that? And so those ancestral children of earth and sky in that sacred site were arrested. So just a timeline. The initial protest began in October 2014. The telescope is intended to be one of the largest in the world, situated on the most sacred site for Native Hawaiian people. April 2nd, 2015, police arrested 31 protesters. Kiai, like Ku Kiai Mauna, is a chant for the protectors, who are blocking access to the summit road. And so that was the beginning. It's still going on today. Mauna Kea is not a commodity. It is a living entity and an ancestor to these people. So these are just a couple of things that came into my awareness in 2016, and then in 2017 when I hadn't heard of these protests until 2017. And then when I did, I was horrified that this is our chance as a country to stand up for the indigenous people of these lands. Not only stand up for them, beside them, but also to remain curious and learn. And that's something that's been in my heart now for nearly 10 years since the Standing Rock protest, and seeing that sign. This goes back to that protest sign I saw. We're still here. So I wanted to begin with that as just someone who, I love this land so much. I am so grateful to have the opportunity to walk these lands that we call home, and yet we know so little about the language of these lands. And that's just a little background as to why I value your experience so much. So from that, I thought we could begin there with just the value of the experience you've had in South America. We're going to get into the wisdom you learned, the relationships you formed, though I thought we could begin with your call to the jungle.
Thanks for such a lovely opening and expressing how there are these indigenous people in our own country and how important it is to connect with the different causes or the different challenges that are presented to this day up here, and highlighting the value in, like, we all have our own calling. So it sounds like through your own experience, you've been really connected to what has occurred up in North America, throughout the United States. For me, I've had this calling to Central and South America, and it's hard to even put to words how I feel the moment my foot steps off the plane. It feels like home. And it feels like I call up here, like the United States, yes, that is my home. The land that I walk on, it is my home. Though there's a different familiarity that I connect with down south. And I believe that this calling started when I was young. I didn't know I had a calling for it. I had a calling for adventure, though in many ways I felt imprisoned as a child. I didn't feel like I could adventure the way I wanted to, or even knew I was empowered to seek out adventure. Um, though many people know this, many people don't know this. My grandfather is Mexican, and I think it was at the age of 11, 12, or 13, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I think maybe I was in seventh or eighth grade at this point. Though before that, I felt deeply called to study the Spanish language. I felt called to learn the language that my grandfather knew. He wasn't speaking it to us, though I knew he had another language within him. And I felt compelled to learn it so I could speak to him. And little did I know that me learning Spanish from middle school up through high school, and I minored in Spanish through college, that it was going to be a connection between he and I as his Alzheimer's progressed. So he had Alzheimer's for, let's see, until 2018 was when he passed away. So how old was I in 2018? Math. So 27. And so for 17 years of my life, 16, 17, 18 years of my life, he had a mental, like a mental disease, an illness that created challenges around him recognizing me. Though when I spoke Spanish to him, he was able to recall the Spanish, and we were able to hold a conversation. And I was like, wow, there is something here. I want to learn more. Like, he migrated, well, his mother migrated from Mexico up to San Antonio, Texas. Though I have a feeling that they were from deeper in the South. And when I was in college, in college at Roger Williams, they encouraged us to study abroad. So I took the opportunity to go to Chile, and I lived in Chile for a month, and I lived with the host family, and wow, did I feel at home. Like, just sitting around this table with people who spoke no English, just Spanish, And I'm sitting at this table now and I can see everybody. And I'm sitting there for our siesta lunch, yapping, talking a mile a minute. And Chileans, they speak all these different countries speak a different type of Spanish, but their Spanish is more like slang, so they shorten the words. So I'm sitting there, I'm just like trying to keep up. And then they all paused and looked at me. And then didn't, they just felt comfortable with me. Like I was a part of their family. And I was invited to parties with them. And went to the parties. They're like, yeah, it's not normal for a host family to invite someone to a birthday party with their friends. Here you are. I was like, wow, this feels like home. And, then I graduated college and I still had this intrigue. I was still interested in learning more. So I started down the corporate path, which was fun because I learned Spanish and I worked in an underprivileged area of the city of Worcester and everyone spoke Spanish. So I was able to speak Spanish with them. And I was able to connect with them in a way that inspired them to want to work together and want to show up for one another. And the results followed. But as I began to be successful in the corporate world, I was like, oh man, this is not it. Ultimately, I broke my back. Universe was like, I have another plan for you. I was like, okay. So I break my back. I start going and trying to figure out who I am outside of this corporate identity. Um, and I decided it's like, okay, I have the opportunity to travel. Yes, I'm in recovery and trying to figure this out, but I'm going to take advantage of this and travel. I went to Costa Rica. I went to Montezuma, and that's a very off the beaten path town in this country. And once again, I was meeting locals. They were welcoming me into the places that foreigners don't go to. I met some people. I'm not going to talk about the types of people that I met, but they welcomed me in and they didn't question me. And I was like, oh, wow, this is some familiarity. So then I come home and I was there for, I think, 3 weeks. I come home, I'm like, okay, wow, interesting. And then, the call to Peru came. One of my best friends was living down there. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go visit him. And we adventured for about a month. And again, we found our path to some indigenous family that lived right outside of Gocta Waterfalls, which is in the middle of the Amazon on the Peruvian side. And they welcomed us in. They're the only house within 3-hour hike of the falls. And we stayed there. We were welcomed. It was nice. It was familiar. And I was like, okay, interesting. Again, I feel this connection. So, my call to adventure, it started early. And I continued to lean into it, especially as I began to connect deeper with my spirituality. And that's when I began to connect deeper with my grandfather, who was on the other side with his illness, though he was still present. And he died just before my trip to Peru. Come back from Peru, have my back surgery, and then travel stops. And it was okay because I needed to heal. I needed to better understand my body to see if I had the strength to be able to backpack, to be able to strength to trek. Because for anyone who's been down to Central and South America, it's not easy. The infrastructure is not there. The roads have potholes everywhere, and the travel is bumpy. And yet, the call was present, and even up until going to Brazil back in May of 2025, so this year, um, it was like, wow, this continues, whatever this is continuing to call me forward and to meet people of the land. And, when I spent time with the Yawanawa, so the Yawanawa tribe, another tribe like we were talking about earlier, a tribe that's coming out of extinction, near extinction. Yeah, near extinction. And yet there I am with them, being embraced by them. Like we went down this 6-hour boat ride, and when we arrived to the village, the men were all standing at the platform. They looked at us and they said, "Leave your belongings here. Don't touch your backpack. Don't bring your boots. You're home now."
So you're getting a little ahead of where we're where. So I want to backtrack.
Yeah, by all means.
And if anybody is interested in just reading a bit more about Chris's first journey with ayahuasca and his first sit, his journey through Peru, there is a piece on our website under the Musings tab called Travel and the Body, where Chris shares the story of hiking through Peru with his best friend, sitting with ayahuasca, coming out of that experience. And that's where you found the house, or?
It was a few days after
Okay.
the ayahuasca experience. We had our ayahuasca experience. It was like a fly by night thing. We showed up with all our luggage. We had our experience, and then the next day at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. we grabbed a bus and drove 10 hours to another town.
Okay, so you had that experience in 2018. Interesting. So while you were having that experience in 2018, I began my daily sits with cacao. And flash forward to Halloween 2024. And this is really the call that I was getting to, and I wanted to back up and say, because for anybody who might not be familiar, we're talking about calls. What's the call? I had this call. And what it might sound like, this voice from the soul that directs you. It might be a strong voice. It might be a whisper. So I just wanted to backtrack to Halloween night in New York City with Mackenzie, the founder of Cacao, where we order our cacao from. I've been sitting with Peruvian cacao since 2018, thanks to her. We followed the call to show up to New York to assist her in leading a ceremony as part of her peace tour, where she was traveling the country, sharing the Ava, otherwise known as Kava, though she was sharing a particular strain from Hawaiʻi, the Moe strain. And she was pairing it with cacao. And when she found out there were going to be about 60 people showing up, she sent up the bat signal and asked if we could lend a hand. So some people may or may not know that I don't like New York City, though I'm a sensitive, so the sensory experience is a lot. Though, interestingly enough, I've heard my own call to bring the heart of the Peruvian jungle into the heart of the concrete jungle, and I denied it. And then when I found out Mackenzie was doing it, I was like, oh, good. Someone else has heard the call, because New York does need it. New York does need that reconnection with nature. So anyways, I want to backtrack to this night, because we both had very different ceremonial experiences. And this was not even a month after we were grounding from our trip in Japan. My heart was still very much in Japan. And this was the night that you heard the call. So I want to hear about what that was like. And I thought you could just share a bit more about the call when you knew you'd be going back to the jungle.
Of course, yes. Thanks for bringing it back. So we were in our ceremony, and it was funny because there was so much cacao and kava, and the number of people who said they were going to go didn't end up matching with the number of people who actually arrived. And it was like, okay, we're going to drink all this. And did we start with kava or cacao?
Kava.
So we started with the Ava. So we started with the Ava. And Mackenzie just kept serving it to me. She just kept bringing it. Like, you want more? I'm like, yes. And just kept serving it, serving it, serving it. And then we switched over to cacao. Same thing, just kept getting served cacao. And I think you've mentioned this before, where this ceremony that Mackenzie was hosting.
So different. It was completely different. And if anybody has taken the cacao stewardship course with Mackenzie, I haven't taken the most up to date one, though. I took the original one back when she had the app, the Kapu app, and then I took the one in, was it November 2023? And Mackenzie's continually purifying and updating her offerings. So I'm not sure what it's like now, though really followed the guidance of when we have cacao circles, cacao sits. It's really a circle because cacao is such a heart opening medicine. It's such a wonderful facilitator. Like, I am not the facilitator, the cacao is the facilitator. I just see myself as the one who prepares the cacao and serves it and just sets up the container and holds the container. The cacao is really facilitating the journey for heart to heart expression. So I learned ceremony a certain way. And if you've sat in cacao circles with me, you know how it goes. We open the container, everyone goes in a circle expressing from the heart. This was very different. There was song, just so much song. Mackenzie did introduce both plant medicines and a little bit of storytelling. So there was so much song, there was dance, there was gathering in circle, holding hands, going out of circle, into circle, out of circle, into circle, standing, dancing. I was like, what is going on here? This is so different. And I was experiencing visuals along with the music. I was seeing ancestors. This was Halloween, so the veil was thin. I already experienced life through a thin veil, so for me, there's virtually no veil. Everybody's ancestors were kind of like marching behind them. It was a trip. I saw our Qigong teacher come up here and tell me, you should drink more kava. And I was like, what is going on? This is different. And I just kept thinking to myself, this is different. This is very different. The music was different. The chanting was different. I hadn't heard anything like it. So yes, very different ceremony.
Well, thanks. Love to hear it from you. You really can like bring us there. So yeah, we're involved in this ceremony that included chants, song, and dance. And Mackenzie had just been in Brazil, and she had just been with the Yawanawa. So she was clearly influenced by her time there. And now I understand why. I'm totally with that now. But back then, I'm like, huh, this is interesting. You know, someone was there playing guitar, singing the chants that they had learned. So it wasn't, it like she did play some MP3s, some digital, but there was a lot of actual song being sung, which was just so beautiful. And, you know, at that point, like Rachel and I were like discussing, we even talked to Mackenzie when we were in Hawaii with her. We're like, we're going to go to Japan. We're going to go to Japan. We're going to go for a while. It's going to be so much fun. Do you want to come? And she's like, when? And we're like, June. June. We're going in June. And though during that ceremony, a voice within me was like, why do you want to go back to Japan? Or you're not going back to Japan. You're not done in Central and South America. And at that point, I knew I was not going back to Japan until the initial journey that I embarked on back in 2012 when I went to Chile was complete.
Thank you for elaborating a bit more on that particular call, because I've seen you adhere to calls before. When you and Marty came home from your 10-year college reunion, you came back. The next day you woke up, you came into the kitchen and you go, I'm going to grad school at Roger Williams. And I was like, okay, I can hear that in your voice. You sure are. And then when we were in ceremony with Mackenzie on Maui, sitting on her stoop, and you were like, I'm going for my PhD to study indigenous economy. It just, this voice comes out of you, and there's no, it's not like anybody would talk you out of anything, anyways, but there's also just, when you hear someone's voice that strong, there's no projecting anything. I think it's just normal sort of relational patterns to sort of project, like, oh, what about this? What if this? And just project. But when I hear your voice like that, I know he's doing exactly what he said he's doing. So when I heard you say what the voice was, when it spoke to you and was like, why are you going back to Japan? I was like, there's no doubting this. There's no questioning it. We're not going back to Japan in June. And then from there's only presence, because there's no planning. These are things we don't plan. You hear the call, and then once it's out, there's only presence to the weaver weaving, as Mackenzie likes to say. If you're present to the opportunities, they reveal the next steps. It's kind of like you're taking a step and the path materializes below your feet. So, do you want to talk a little bit about what it was like remaining present to the weaver from that point?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, so the story continues. And I'll touch back to our time in Hawaii. And when I looked at Mackenzie, I'm like, I'm going to get my PhD and my study is going to be indigenous economies. She's like, yes, you are. And then I also said something along the lines of like, I'm going to be a professor. And she's like, yes, you are. And we just let it be. So after that ceremony in October, it's like, okie dokie, like, let's see what's next. It was like a month later, I got an email from Roger Williams, the Mario Gabelli School of Business. They're like, hey, do you want to teach an entrepreneurial finance class? And I was like, yes, I do. And then after I sent the email, I'm like, what is entrepreneurial finance? Though it's like, it was a part of the call. So you say yes, and you figure it out along the way. And so I said yes. And then I went and, school started in January. And I sat with a professor that is now like a mentor of mine. And we got coffee. And we started talking about like things outside of the school. I started talking to him about, he's like, what the hell? How'd you get here? I'm like, I don't know, man. He's like, how'd you get this job? I'm like, I have no idea. He's like, you need to tell me these things. I'm like, dude, I didn't even know. And so we're talking, we're sitting, we're talking. And then I start talking to him about doing ayahuasca in Peru. And he starts sharing stories about his connections to the indigenous in the United States and how his sister is studying indigenous economies within the United States. And I'm like, yo, I want to study indigenous economies in South and Central and South America. He's like, of course you do. And I was like, all right, the weaver is weaving. We had never had these conversations before. I've never felt I've always felt the heart connection. He always felt like a father figure as he because he doesn't have kids, but all of his students, especially within the cafe program, he called us his children. So I always felt that off of him. But we had never had this like heart to heart type of conversation outside of the scope of higher education. So we start talking, we engage with this, like, okay, start working, teaching, having a good time. And then we go for spring break. We're like, let's go to Florida.
Spring break, Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, like, let's do this. Like, we got this now, this like different income coming in that's on top of our business. Like, let's enjoy it. So we go to Florida with the help of your parents. Your parents were so generous with supporting our trip. And we land in Florida. We look out the plane window. Brazil, right on the plane. I was like, huh, interesting. Then we go through the airport. I'm like, whoa, this is the airport I go to when I've been traveling outside of to Costa Rica and to Peru. Interesting.
You were like, there's a burrito place right there. Burritos, burritos, burritos. There it is.
Yeah, there was this knowing. I'd never forget the burrito. The best airport food I think there ever has been. And then we're hanging out, we're having a good time at the hotel.
Eating acai every day.
And this one morning, Mackenzie sent us a message. I'm like, oh, great. Hey, Mackenzie. But we were like, oh, let's go grab some acai bowls and we'll go take it to the patio, eat those, and listen to her message. And wow. we start listening to her message and she is ignited. Yeah. She is ignited. Because she had been again in Brazil back in February, I think it was. So she had spent more time with the Yawanawa, and she's talking about the Yawanawa people. She's dropping names, she's dropping energy, she's dropping the feeling. And then she's like, big celebration for Hushahu in May. Y'all want to come? And my body felt like there was lightning through it. I'm like, yes, I do. And again, I didn't know the how. I just knew the yes. Mm-hmm. And I trusted the rest to kind of unfold. But there were these little nuggets, there were these little clues along the way that said Brazil was coming. And we could perceive it before the invitation actually occurred.
Yep. So that made it a real easy yes for you. And it was really cool being a witness to all of it. Okay, so then came May, and it was time to go to Brazil. I know, let's see, where do we want to start? There's a lot of logistics. I know people have been very curious about logistics, safety, the itinerary, and of course the people, the tribe you stayed with. So I'll leave it up to you. Where would you like to start? You want to go chronological order from the flights, or do you just want to go straight into being there? You want to go straight into talking about the ayahuasca?
Probably hold off on the ayahuasca right now.
Uh,
There's so much more.
mm-hmm.
The ayahuasca is profound in itself, but there's so much more there.
So maybe we save the ayahuasca for a different YouTube, because I know that there have been so many questions about that. And we do want to cover enough to give people an idea for when the Yawanawa come stateside and come to New York, upstate New York, for a weekend. There's going to be something I'm really excited for is a drum guitar workshop. So we'll get to that. So if you just want to, speak at this point, whatever's in your heart, I'm going to leave it completely up to you. And if I have questions along the way, I'll let you know.
Cool. Where to even begin? Like
Begin with the flights.
I begin with the flights. Yeah, that's logistics. I mean, yeah, I guess it's important. Like, I flew from Boston to Miami. In Miami, I met up with two other beings from the cacao community. So it was cool heading down there because like Mackenzie put out the beacon to the cacao community to see who wanted to go, and two others showed up, and I met them in Miami. I've never met them before in person. First time we met in real life. And then there was another Pena. I was like, how is this even like possible? Like, there's two Penas going on this trip. I never hear this name. Like, for people who are like white, I guess. Like, I don't know. It's like I don't know. It's like it's hard to really explain because it's a name that's there, but like it's not really around our community. Um, so there's two Peñas. We're on this flight. We then fly from Miami to Brasilia, and that was an overnight red eye, and pretty smooth flight. We get there. We see Mackenzie. We meet Mackenzie there. And little do we know that like a ton of the retreat goers are on this flight from Brasilia to Rio Branco. I think it's Rio Blanco. And then so that was like a 3-hour flight. And then from there, we fly to Cruzeiro do Sul. And on the flight from, is it Rio Blanco? So from that second flight to Cruzeiro do Sul, Branco. So yeah, Rio Branco. From the second flight to Cruzeiro do Sul, the retreat goers are on it because there's not many flights that fly there because it's just this small airport. You know, it's probably the size of Worcester Airport or a small municipal airport. And they only have a few flights a week. So we get there, everyone's meeting in like to get our luggage, and that's when our first circle occurs, and we're all looking around like, okay, we're all doing this together. Who are you? And it was okay to be like, who are you? You know, no one knew. So we just like grabbed our bags. We all grabbed taxis. And I think it was Shauna and I and Shiva. We like didn't have a taxi. So we were just hanging out at the airport. Everyone's already back at the hotel and we're just hanging out at the airport like, okay. And then it started to pour. The heavens opened up. And it started to rain, rain, and rain. And we had to go inside because it started like flooding. And even the taxi came to pick us up, and the taxi driver was like, we're going to wait. So we all just like hang out there. And we're on jungle time. So you kind of mentioned the itinerary. So when we ended up meeting up with Chiva and Elise, who were like the ones who coordinated the international folks, and even there was a ton of folks from Brazil that came. So people from outside the tribe that they were facilitating, they let us know, like, yeah, we have an itinerary, though the jungle is the one that shows us the timeline. So we're not going to let you know. But we'll let you know when it's time. We'll give you the times, we'll write it out, but we can't tell you because we don't know. The jungle will tell us. And that night at Crucero do Sol, the hotel we were in the hotel we were staying at, we we had an open we had an opening circle.
Check on why Daisy's barking. I'll be right back.
So I'll continue. So we had an opening circle, and there were 40 of us retreat goers. And within those 40 retreat goers, we went around the circle. We talked, we shared our intentions for the retreat, and not everyone spoke English. Many people spoke Portuguese, and there was no issues with that because there was translators. And after everyone spoke, it would be translated so everyone understood what was said. And everyone sat there patiently listening. And it didn't matter, which was like, oh, this is like already creating peace. Because especially heading into this type of journey and this type of retreat where you know there's going to be ceremony, the last thing I want is any discord. Because the discord's going to show up in ceremony. But like, we had some synergy amongst 40 of us that there was this just love and respect the entire time we were together. And I believe that aided in the depths of our ceremony. So we went around, we had our circle, and we shared our intention. And the retreat was to celebrate Hushahu. And Hushahu is the first spiritual leader for the Yawanawa people. And she is responsible for bringing like a lot of the artwork and the jewelry up to into existence. Like these were intuitive calls for her. And we learned that these intuitive calls to create jewelry gave the opportunity for all the women to create jewelry with their heart first. If there was a bead off, they would scrap it because they wanted it to be pure. They wanted to be in a pure state when creating it. So the jewelry created the opportunity for women to create their own villages. So we were there to celebrate Hushahu, who was coming out of a year-long diet on with boa constrictor heart. I'm not too sure how she ingested it, how it was prepared, though it's said that if it's prepared incorrectly, it will lead to death. And the entire time, whenever she spoke to us, she always talked to us about the dichotomy of life and death and how she actually faced her death and she thought she wasn't going to come out of it. And she did. So we were all there being like, okay, we're in the circle. What's our intention? What are we going to share? What are we doing? What's going on? And then the next morning, we were going to get on a bus and drive 3 hours to a river. And it was important to have like trash bags for your luggage. Because if it rains when you're on the river and your luggage isn't protected, that's going to be soaked and you'll get soaked. And it's just going to create another experience, just another challenge for you to have to operate with. So we get on this 3 hour bus ride, and ooh, wow, what a bumpy road. Like you'd think 2 lanes, but it was really 1 lane because the bus would swerve in and out of the different lanes to avoid the potholes that were deep. We finally get to the river, and this is our first contact with the Yawanawa, because the Yawanawa, the men were meeting us with their boats. And the village knew we were arriving too, the village by the river. And we get off the bus, and then they all just start grabbing our luggage, walking down a hill, and loading up the boats. And they didn't, it was just what it was. They just did it. It was just a part of the path, it was a part of the moment. And then we hung out there, and I was so stoked. Like, everyone was getting these like rice bowls with meat, and I saw a little stand that was selling empanadas, and I was like, yeah, empanadas. This is the best because I love the empanadas. And the empanadas are like little, like Pop Tarts or something filled with meat or cheese or vegetables. So I grabbed an empanada or two, and I enjoyed it. And then we got on our boat. I sat next to Shauna, Mackenzie, and Joy were behind us, and they prepared cacao for the boat ride. So there we were, sitting on this boat where you couldn't talk to each other because the motor was so loud. And they were all excited because they had new motors. And these new motors cut down the boat ride time from 8 hours to 6 hours. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what was it like when there weren't any motors? If they're saying this motor is making it 8 hours, how were they getting down there? How often were they actually leaving? Because it would probably be like a few day trek, I would imagine. But we get on the boat and we go down the river. And it was magical because I could start to feel the lack of electric influence. I could start to feel the lack of the grid, the lack of the electricity, the lack of the Wi-Fi, the lack of cell phone coverage. And I felt raw and naked, though I was still fully clothed.
That always gives me chills because it makes me think of in Avatar, not Airbender, but the James Cameron film with the Navi. And they refer to the forest of Pandora, their planet. And I think her name's Awa. And at one point, Jake Sully prays to Awa. And I forget his Navi's wife's name. But she's like, Awa is neutral. She doesn't interfere. Something along those lines. It's been a while since I've seen the film. Though this part always stuck out when the battle was raging and the whole planet of Pandora like stepped up to protect itself.
The animals and everything.
Yeah. And she's like, Jake, she heard you. Awa's heard you. By the way, what Chris is doing right now, I'll just explain. Chris is communing with hape, which is a tobacco-based powder, fine powder, that this blend includes some ground bark from the sunu. If you've never had hape, it's a really wonderful experience. Really calming, grounding. I will never forget more so my second hape experience at Marcy's house. And I just felt like the past and the future dissolved. And I was just smack dab in the middle of the present moment. And all there was the now. So if you're interested, Chris has been bringing the hape everywhere. So if you see us out in the wild and you want to try it, just let us know. But yeah, as you talk about going up the river through the jungle and the lack of interference, I think of Ewa, like she's heard you. So maybe we'll continue chronologically. You arrived at your final destination after the boat ride. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so as I touched upon earlier, after 6 hours on the boat, which was so enjoyable, and to give you an idea of, we were going through the jungle, and they call it the forest. Just want to highlight that because we live in a forest up here, and we tend to call it a jungle down there. So, the question is, would this be considered a jungle to them?
You know I call it a jungle up here.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. But just something to think about, that we are not so different geographically in the way our biodiversity is. We just have different land, different plants, different trees. So we get to central Awawana, and this is Hushahu's home. So this Hushahu had just got out of her retreat a week before, and she hasn't seen anybody.
And that was 1 year.
1 year. She was in 1 year solitude while her husband was there watching over her. And we found out that her niece, who was like 15 or 16, Yawa, went on retreat also. So there was three of them in this solitude in the middle of the jungle in this space. So she had left her solitude a week prior to us arriving. We get to central Awawana, and the men are at the end of the dock. They're like, it wasn't a dock because you just landed and you had to walk up a hill, like a muddy hill. And they looked at us and they're like, hey. And I'm like, whoa, hey, hey. And they said, I put my backpack on. I can carry my backpack. I picked up my boots that I wasn't wearing. I can carry my boots. And they looked like, put them down. Put those back on the boat. You just traveled a long way to get here. You're home, and we're going to take care of this from here. We'll bring everything up. You just walk down this path. It was like a long wooden deck. You just walk down the deck and go make yourself comfortable. So we did. We walked in, we got there, and then all the men started bringing all our stuff in. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. I was finally able to breathe a little bit more. I was able to relax a little bit more. The nerves of where the hell am I going kind of subsided. I had the nerves, but nerves and excitement, right? They're kind of,
sides of the same coin.
yeah. So it's nerves are great. I didn't let them overtake me. If I did, I don't know if I would have even went on the trip. But so we get there. We're inside Central Awawana, the main building, and just looking at all the artwork. I'm I see a picture of a panther. I'm like, whoa, Trixie's here. There's this giant boa constrictor snake painted on the ground. There's a tiger mural here. Then there's an elder mural here.
May I ask, so you're describing the building in which all the ceremonies take place.
Yep. That was, yes. So that was the place that our ceremonies were going to take place. And then later we learned that all those were painted there with the intention to protect the space. So they weren't just thrown up for a good time.
They look cool.
Yeah. They were thrown up, they were painted and put there to protect the space. So we're there. And they're like, okay, let's go show you where you're staying. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm probably going to stay between a tree or something like that. And they took us to the top of a hill, and the hill was all clay. There's no stairs or anything built into it, though they carved stairs in the clay. So we walked up the clay stairs, and sorry. And we get to the top, And there are huts. There are huts there. I'm like, whoa. And someone looked at me. He's like, hey, Chris. I'm like, huh? He's like, hey, I got us a cabin right here. I thought it would be great because we're at the top of the hill. The bathrooms and the showers are here. I'm like, all right, thanks, man. Thanks for looking out. And like, Hidalgo's like now one of my homies because we really got to know each other. And little did I know that he was a space holder for the event. So amongst the retreat goers, there were space holders who were there. Like there was somebody who's a nurse by day, a Yawanawa practitioner by night. And so we show us the huts, and then we all look, and there's a giant rainbow. I was like, whoa, this is like a great omen. Like I'm seeing this rainbow. And then we go back down the hill, go back into the main building where the ceremonies were being held, which was the home for Hushahu and her family. So like behind the murals were rooms that had hammocks. They all slept in hammocks. So there was a room behind the elder, a room behind the tiger, a room behind the panther, and then there was another room, and then there was a room above at the top that there were stairs that went up, and that's where Hushahu lived at the very top. And so like this was their house. I was like, wait a second. So we're hanging out in their home. And then then like we had a little circle and it started to pour. That as soon as the last boat arrived, it started to pour. It started to come down in buckets.
As soon as the last boat
Yeah.
arrived.
And we're all like, wow, what a miracle. The last boat arrived. Like, wow, wow, wow. And one of the members of the family started to speak to us and said that Hushahu is still feeling very sensitive. She wanted to come and say hello, though she's feeling everybody right now and thinks it's best to rest. But she's feeling you all and wants to be sure you know that you're welcome here and that she's sorry that she couldn't greet us. She was sorry that she couldn't greet us. And we're like, no, it's okay. We get it. It's all good. And as they're talking, we found out that the luggage hadn't arrived yet. They didn't know where the luggage boat was, and it was downpouring. So then they said Mazzini, who was the leader of the village about 5 minutes up the river, was getting on a boat to go find the luggage. And I was like, what? I loved this. Because I'm like, yeah, like, of course. Like, what else are you going to do? Like, let's go find where this stuff is. It doesn't matter about the elements. Like, I was like, this is like was a really powerful moment of just seeing masculine energy and having the fearlessness to ensure that the guests welcome into the home felt welcomed and felt like their luggage was just as important as they are. And then they're talking about like, okay, we're all gonna go get dinner. We're gonna have dinner. While the luggage is being found, we're gonna have dinner. So there's this little cafeteria, the kitchen, where they have all their meals. So we go into the cafeteria and there's these lovely group of people who are the chefs for our whole retreat. And they served us rice, they served us beef, and I learned that night that beef is a delicatessen. They never have beef, but they wanted to welcome us and they wanted to have something special for us.
A delicacy?
Yeah, delicacy. Yeah. Thanks. So we had beef for dinner, and that was the only time we had it. And then after dinner, we went back into the building, and they're like, all right, everybody, we don't think you should go back up to the top of the hill. It's a mess. It's all muddy. We think it's best for everyone to set up their hammocks down here. And I'm thinking to myself, I am so done peopling. I am so done peopling. The luggage had arrived. My bag with the hammock and stuff made it there. And I'm like, I'm going to the top. I'm going there. Like, I get the guidance, I understand the guidance, I respect the guidance, though I also respect my guidance and know that I need my space. So I grab my gear, I have my backpack on. My other bag was already at the top, my smaller backpack. I grabbed my suitcase, my little carry on suitcase. I had all my clothing. We're going up this hill. The stairs had disappeared because they were clay and it rained, so the clay turned to mud. And I'm like, yippee, let's do this one step at a time. And I start walking up. Things are going well. It gets a little bit slippery. I slipped and I fell, and I'm like, oh, this clothing's gonna have mud on it for a while, and that's okay. I'm still gonna make my way up. I used my suitcase to prop me up to stand up to get my footing, and then this woman comes up, grabs my suitcase, looks at me with so much love, doesn't say a word, grabs it, and just walks up. And it was Yawa. And that was before
like 16-year-old?
and that was before I knew what a warrior she was.
So you say woman, she's 16. Like young woman.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible.
Grabbed my luggage and just went right up. I was like, all right, I'm going to watch her to figure out how to get up this. I got my act together, walked up, and set up my hammock in the dark, set up like all my things, and it was an interesting sleep. I wasn't used to the area, but I was not used to hammock sleeping. But now I love hammock sleeping, and or sleeping in a hammock. And now, so like that was night one.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so that's night one. You think we wrap this video up here? We're just over an hour.
Keep it digestible.
Yeah, and then next time, yeah, Trixie wants a little bit of loves. So next time we'll talk about your first morning. We'll talk about what everybody wants to hear about, the ceremonies, and whatever else we missed. Maybe a lot of the storytelling.
Yeah, I think that's where we'll start next time. Is just like the meeting of the women of the tribes, meeting with Shahu, and just kind of seeing how that all opens up from there. Because that was so powerful.
Okay, so next time we'll pick up with meeting the women of the tribe and their greeting, and we'll take it from there. All right.
Cool. Thanks for taking the time to tune into this. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.